back to the Positive Energy Project. This is a story of how we spread good vibes through hard times, through good times. We talk to entrepreneurs, celebrities, investors. Today, we are super lucky to be joined by one of our investors, one of our board members, one of our mentors and our friends, Emily White. Very, very excited to have her here. Emily is a very, very interesting person, one of the first powerhouses in tech in Silicon Valley. Started your career out at Google, moved over to Facebook, became the director of business ops at Instagram. Is that right? Yeah. From there, she became the chief operating officer at Snapchat. She sits on the board of Lululemon. You're on the board of Women in Tech. What is that one?
I told you.
I was starting in 2008. I joined the board of the National Center for Women in IT. So it's really about getting more women into tech. But I started in 2008 and I was on it for almost 10 years, and then I left, and I'm on the board of X Prize now, just in LA.
Yes, which we definitely want to touch on, because part of the Positive Energy Project, we talk about positive energy for positive change. So I think that is something that we want to talk about, that you represent. And then most recently, your current title is President of Anthos Capital.
Yeah.
Yes, which is also incredible.
The exciting thing about Anthos, obviously you come from the tech world, you're a bit of a tech maven, and Anthos is industry agnostic, right? That's how we met. We don't do anything with technology. We're a consumer product. So we'll talk about how your lessons in tech sort of apply.
By the way, that's where you're wrong. Think about it. Like, so much of your business is tech. I mean, you're carrying these things around. You're recording me on this. Like, how did this actually get here? There's a lot of technology involved in getting here. So I feel like it's this ubiquitous thing that, like, it's been completely unboxed.
Yeah.
It is not the entirety of your business, but it is absolutely part of what you do.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's right. That's smart.
We couldn't do what we do without tech,
No.
basically. And 20% of our sales are online.
There you go.
Crazy.
Exactly.
I think a simple definition of tech is stuff that makes life better, right? Stuff that makes life easier.
Definitely.
The first piece of technology was the wheel.
Yeah, there you go.
So cool. We're here. Thank you, you guys. We wouldn't be able to do what we do without you, without Anthos, without this. It's been a hell of a ride for the last. We've been partners for 18 months now.
That was actually the first investment that I was involved in.
That's
I think
right.
I might have
It was your first day at Anthos.
It might have been. Yeah, it was early.
Maybe first week.
Yeah.
So really cool. Let's start with your background before we get into your thesis. I guess how has your experience in tech sort of evolved over the years, right? Starting from Google to working your way up to an executive at Snapchat.
Let's go pre-Google. Like, how do you end up at Google?
Yeah.
And then take us down that journey of becoming the COO of Snap.
You guys, we're gonna need like 10 hours. There's a lot of twists and turns. I'll give you the medium version, which is I'm from Silicon Valley. I'm from the Bay Area. I grew up in Palo Alto and Atherton. I went to high school in Palo Alto at this awesome small all-girls high school where it was like cool to be smart. I went away to Vanderbilt, and I kind of knew a couple things about myself. Number one, my parents got divorced when I was in college, and I knew for me it was really important to be financially independent. And I know that sounds silly, but it was really on my mind at the time. And so while I loved art and that was a passion of mine, I was like, how do I actually make money? And so I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'll study art history and become a lawyer. And so the summer after my junior year of college, I went and got an internship at Wilson Sonsini, which was the firm at the time that was taking all of the companies public. And this was in 99.
Wow.
And it was in Silicon Valley, and I was in corporate securities, which was the team that was doing that work. And I was at the printers, which is literally like Kinko's, at 2 a.m. with partners, from the firm, me as an intern, and we were proofreading IPO documents.
Oh my God.
At the printer before.
That's
I was
amazing.
like, first of all, no one wants me proofreading their IPO paperwork because I'm really just not that detail oriented. And second of all, I do not want to be doing this when I'm that age. I just don't want to be. That's not the life I want. I loved the innovation, the energy, the meritocracy that came along with tech. I knew the area incredibly well because I grew up there. And so I took spring break of my senior year off, and I flew home, and I got actually my first job.
No way.
So hard to talk. I mean, you cram all this in, but I actually went to work for a company that was a PayPal competitor. And it started 6 months after PayPal. And it was person-to-person payments when PayPal was Palm Pilot to Palm Pilot payments.
Wow.
And so I went to work for this guy named Mike Arrington, who then in a later life went to start TechCrunch. It goes on and on and on. And that was like a flash in the pan. I think I was in there for like 7 months. Third round of layoffs. I found myself without a job, and I was like, oh my God, who wants to hire like an art history major? And when like fucked company is like blowing up as a .com, as a website where everyone's going to see all the layoffs. It was like kind of a nightmare. And so actually Brian and I were together at the time, and I borrowed Brian's computer, and I just was online all the time and working any like remote relationships I had. Wow. And so I ended up meeting someone who knew someone at Google, and AdWords was in like alpha at the time. Okay. It had, I don't know, like in the low thousands, maybe not even, of advertisers.
Wow.
And Google was 200 people. And I was an eager, willing, recent college grad who like could get through an interview without, I don't know, messing up too bad enough to get a job. And so I was sat like in the corner working as the first non-engineer on AdWords, and no one cared at Google at all about making money. So I was just like toiling away in my office and like working with engineers to give them suggestions and work with the marketers to help it work better and approving copy and like all of that stuff. And then of course, AdWords ended up becoming the way that Google made its and still makes its money.
So you were full-time at AdWords, like at Google, working in the AdWords department?
Yeah, in the beginning of 2001.
Was that pre-Eric Schmidt, or was Eric Schmidt?
It was before Eric Schmidt.
Oh my gosh.
That's crazy. Cool. Not that it matters for this part, we're going to talk about it later, but in that 200-person environment at Google, what was the male to female breakdown?
You know, it's so funny. This was like before any of that was even discussed.
Yeah.
It had a pretty robust ad sales department that was working with like Fortune 500 clients at the time, primarily in New York, selling like banner ads at the top of Google. Mm-hmm. The heavy like female influence over there, but run by Tim Armstrong, who of course went on to do AOL and yada yada. Yep. But certainly it was mostly men. It was mostly men. I mean,
And you were there for 10 years.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a long time at any company. Yeah. And so you were from our perspective, one of the few women who were able to start in tech from the very beginning and then climb to the highest levels. And I think as your career evolved, you wanted other women to join you, right? So how has your experience in tech influenced that motivation to start these clubs and these communities and sit on these boards for women in tech, right?
Yeah.
Like, what did you see and hear and how come, like, what was that dynamic like, right? That inspired you to do what you do today?
Yeah. What's funny is you think about like the word like the happiness project. Mm-hmm. You think, certainly what goes into happiness. Well, we think sometimes I do about like failures, like, oh my God, this thing was so hard, and through it I grew and got stronger, which is absolutely true, and I have many of those moments. For this specifically, it was actually the other thing that goes into happiness, which is when you were inspired by something that works really well. Mm-hmm. I love to look for bright spots. Right? Like it can be overwhelming and depressing to look at all the shit that's broken. If you can figure out what's actually working well and then push on that and be wind at the back of that, then you can actually create amazing things, right? In often a lower friction way. And so this was a scenario where I was incredibly fortunate. I had some issues at my first employer in terms of like I was clearly a female, and I had people who were in more senior positions who clearly knew I was a female and they were male, and it was like uncomfortable. Sure. But when I got to Google, I have to say, I was either treated well or ignored because no one cared about making money. So it was like, oh, she's in the office. And of course, we're in this weird position, and I was in a weird position because often the male-female dynamics as they relate in the workplace have to do with power, right? Yeah. And I was a woman who was the first non-engineer on AdWords, and it blew up almost overnight. So before you knew it, I had a huge team and huge revenue responsibility. And so I actually, because of that, had power. So I've observed really challenging working conditions for women. I see it all of the time, and I see decisions made on gender that should not be genderized decisions. But personally, I've had an amazing experience, primarily because Sheryl Sandberg came to work at Google, I think about 8 months after I started. She was first the external CFO, and then she came and was my direct boss. So it was like me and her in a cube, and we really worked together for her entire 7 years there. And then 2 years after she went to Facebook, I also went to Facebook and worked with her there too.
She played a big role in recruiting you?
Of course,
Right.
yes. I actually almost left when she first left Google. I decided not to.
Wow.
So she had really, I think she has done such an amazing job, and I certainly, is in a tough position with some of the media that's come out in the last several years about this, but I would say personally I have benefited tremendously from her showing the way about how women can support other women. She created spaces at work, she created spaces in her home where she brought together women who she wanted to invest in, and she created a community for us, like reasons to come together, reasons to work together. She used to have a speaker series at her house every 4 to 6 weeks where she would invite 60 of us for dinner to meet with then Mayor Bloomberg or Bono or an amazing group of people and access. And it was through that community that I got to know an amazing set of women, including some who actually I've been able to recruit over the years into our portfolio companies. But
Totally.
it was through those relationships that I formed a passion about it. So both when I was at Google, starting to get involved with the National Center for Women in Technology, and then personally starting to create community in my own way.
That's incredible. And what we like to do too is, clearly you're so selfless and you're so humble, but I would love to focus on personal development while you were at Google, because obviously your background, you maybe weren't that prepared, but when AdWords started to take off and you became this badass manager at Google, climbing the ranks, working with Sheryl Sandberg, what were you doing on a daily basis to get better, to make sure that you were, capable of leading this team?
To keep up with that rocket ship.
Yeah. You guys know it all comes down to the same stuff, right? It's like hard work and curiosity, right? Really, it's like that's really fundamentally, I had those two qualities. I was really curious. It's like I didn't ever think that I would be working in the world of ads, right? Like no one dreams that this is what they're going to do when they grow up. But I loved Google as a product. I used it in college. When I got there as an employee, I was like, this is quite amazing what they're building here, and the capacity to change the way that businesses all over the world market themselves there's a lot of power, and so you just get interested in it, and then you work your ass off, right? Yeah. I would say that there's so many cliches, but they're so true too. I mean, this mentality of like turning lemons into lemonade, really, pretty much any time something shitty happens, I relatively quickly go into okay, how can we turn this into an advantage and become stronger because of it? And that has also served me really well, because even though I've been incredibly lucky at joining rising tide companies. I joined them early. I joined Snapchat when there were 30 people there. Wow. And there are a lot of bumps on the road, and you have to know, part of just dealing with ambiguity is it's almost like moguls when you're skiing. You just need to develop the muscles so that you can take them with your legs, right? Yeah. And not only that, but learn to really enjoy it, right? So that, it's a mentality that you adopt after. Otherwise it would kill you. Yeah. Otherwise none of us would be sitting here. It's too fucking hard.
Yeah. Totally. So you mentioned the word meritocracy, right? You said tech is a meritocracy, and you enjoyed the benefits of hard work, and thankfully people rewarded you, and your career grew. So I guess what advice would you give to somebody fresh out of school that might feel disadvantaged entering a tech space, right? Or whatever industry, when you see the meritocracy that I guess you grew up in, is it just work hard and be curious? What advice would you give that 22-year-old Emily White?
Yeah. I think about this a lot only because I spend a lot of my time with younger people for some reason. I'm just really attracted. I've always managed a younger group of people, not always, but for a lot of my career. And we have an awesome intern program here, as you guys know. I would say, first of all, I get asked this question all the time, how did you end up in tech as an art history person? I'm like, have you looked at actually who's in tech? There are a lot of non-computer science people, first of all. So that is completely ridiculous. I think it's much more a frame of mind. And then there's how do you actually put it together? Coding, product management, business development. But it's really a frame of mind around innovation and creating possibility, right? So I would say, if I had to typecast myself, I am very creative, but I'm not naturally the person who's going to think of like, oh my God, there's this like fifth dimension that, you know, we can totally take advantage of and no one even knows it's there, but it's going to be there in 20 years. I'm the person who's like, oh my God, you're totally right. I'm on board. Let's go make that happen in a creative way, right? By taking down boundaries. So that's who I am. But there are roles for all sorts of people in tech. I would say the other thing is the one thing that sometimes you have to learn hard lessons twice, but that I always default to is like listen to my gut, listen to my whispers, because there is a lot that I have learned about my instincts, frankly, being right, and seen plenty of times that when I don't listen to them, I end up like in a pickle, or at least I know that I'm not going to be in a great spot. So there's something about the gut instincts. It's again, like when I had the offer from Google, it was like Google versus Oracle effectively. Yeah. And like everyone was telling me to take Oracle. It was, I mean, listen, we had fucked company.com. Every .com was going under. Yeah. You know, Oracle was like the stock you invested in, right? But I was like, I really love this company and I love these people and I love the way they're thinking and I'm young and I can take a risk. I have no mortgage. I can, no kids. Mm-hmm. All right.
Love that.
That's awesome.
So back to the career development, you go Google to Facebook, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then at Facebook, I think a big turning point is when you ended up working on the Instagram desk.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that and then how that got you to Snap?
Yeah. So I had been working on mobile. So when I joined Facebook and during that sort of 2010, 2011 time period, do you remember Facebook had been primarily desktop? So people were viewing it on desktop, not on their mobile phone. And so product managers and engineers were designing and developing for desktop. And mobile was coming, but it wasn't really staffed. There wasn't a strategy. Yeah. And so we actually created a mobile team. So part of the job was like, let's get Facebook to a place where we're developing for mobile correctly. And also the ecosystem around that is ripe for us to do well in that space. So I had been working on that. I had had my second child, and then while I was away, Instagram had moved onto campus, and acquisition had closed. And it was the first company that Facebook had bought that was more than just an acquisition for the hires, right? It wasn't an acqui-hire situation, it wasn't just engineers. And but most of the people at Facebook didn't understand that. So, and they didn't know how to really integrate a company. So they had sort of thrown some resources over the walls. And by the time I came back from maternity leave, they had given, I think a lawyer had looked over the Instagram terms of service and put in the language asking for, or basically taking rights away from users for their content, allowing Facebook to use it in ads. Do you guys remember this?
No.
No, this was in 2012 maybe.
Okay.
Wow.
And there was this huge uproar. And someone was like, Kevin needs some help on the business side. Will you go spend some time with him? And I just absolutely fell in love with him, the business that they were growing, and we really hit it off. But I said no twice to going over and running the business side with him because I was told the job is too small for me. It's just going to become Facebook photos. Yeah. And I wasn't listening to my whisper. And one day I was driving home and I was like, what am I doing? We're about to piss away $1 billion, a really talented team. And more importantly, the ability for us to disrupt ourselves, which is like a gift. I mean, it's one of the hardest things to do as a company, right? And so I went back in and I was like, you're wrong. This job, if anything, is I'm too small for it. Yeah. And I took the job, and Kevin and I started working right away on how do we solidify what Instagram is and what our brand is and what our mission and our vision and our values are, so we could tell that story first internally so that the Facebook group understood it and could act accordingly, and then the world.
Wow. Is that hard to do within Facebook? Like going to Instagram, still kind of being integrated, but trying to figure out like who is Instagram, what is Instagram while you're in Facebook? Like what is that like?
No, it was so fun because I would say that the team came to the table with a culture already. It just, no one had done this before. And so it wasn't articulated that well. So really it was like, all right, Kevin, let's get in an office for in a little huddle room for a week. And we just wrote and rewrote the mission and the vision and the values, and brought Mike in and socialized with the team, and then eventually shared it with the Instagram team. And when we felt like it was right, sort of brought it out and pulled it into the ways that you're behaving. And I think through that also found a way to tell the story to the rest of the company so they had a better idea of how to interact with the brand and not just step on it, but support it.
Wow, I love that.
So this is awesome, and I think the lesson is trust your gut, and I think your curiosity and the combination of curiosity and hard work allowed you to sort of create opportunities, right?
Yeah.
And we're talking to Patrick Schwarzenegger yesterday. He was like, you can't climb a ladder with your hands in your pockets, right? So you sort of got out and created your own luck. For us, I know for me personally, as a 22-year-old starting this company, I was totally insecure, a little bit of imposter syndrome, right? Am I the right person to run it? Are we the right guys to do this? Yet we had these gut instincts, and early on I didn't trust them. I sort of did what I thought startup people do, right? And it led to bad things happening. So how do you, it's easy to say trust your gut, but like how do you overcome that fear and that insecurity, right? Because I think a lot of 22-year-olds, whether you're a startup or tech or in finance, feel it.
Yeah. So the hard part is, like, part of it is just it comes with time. Like, you basically learn, right? So you could listen to me, or you could learn it your own way. I would say the shortcut, frankly, in life is probably surround yourself with like high quality humans who have track records of making good decisions, and that is another absolute key. Like, if you're not in the right group, you might as well, you're just wasting your time. Like, I think about the blood, sweat, and tears that I spent, the time that I spent at these businesses helping build them, could have been worth absolutely nothing, right? I could not have great relationships coming out of them. They could not have done well. I could have wasted a ton of energy, just as I did, with nothing to prove, right? Or nothing to show for it, I should say. But I happened to, and again, this is partially luck, but if with your glasses on, finding people who have track records of really making good decisions, visions that you can really believe in, right? I think, again, the vision and the values, but finding those mentors who like have been there before and you can go to and be like, my gut says this, everyone else is telling me this, like, can you just help me square this a little bit?
That's interesting. And I think that it's probably, you're going to say it's who you surround yourself with growing up, but you talk about being senior year spring break, right? Like most people, especially most people at Vanderbilt.
I know, it's all Florida, like totally fun,
Yeah, they're ready to go to Cancun. And you decided to go and you were home in the Bay looking for jobs. And I'm curious because this came up when we were talking with Baron Davis. He mentioned when he was really signed a max deal, he was taking internships in the off season, trying to work on film studios. And Patrick Schwarzenegger.
Internships were the best thing ever. I learned everything I didn't want to do in an internship.
Yeah. So Baron talked about that. Patrick talks about when he was 13, running his dad's memorabilia business only because he offered it. So it's just like that idea of what was your 20-year-old self saying to you when you were making yourself vulnerable, passing on spring break, and saying, I'm going to go look for a job. Like, do you recall those days? Or, like, I guess, what would the advice be to people to follow more of that? Like,
my dad had this great saying that he would, like, hammer in. He actually had two of them. The first one I'll share, it's just funny. So he's a plastic surgeon, and he, like, would go remove tattoos from gang members on weekends because you can't actually, it's hard to get out of a gang if you have their markings on you. And so he used to say, tattoos, permanent reminder of a temporary feeling. I'm like, don't get one. Yeah. The other thing, I'm married someone with a tattoo instead of getting one myself. But the other thing he used to say is short-term pain, long-term gain, right? Yeah. Like, life is like a 401k. The more you put into it in the beginning, the more you get out in the end. And actually, subsequently, I think about this stuff a lot. I think about when I came to Anthos, I was like, no one saves for retirement. Where's our 401k program? Where's our 401k matching program? Like, let's get to 100%. That was so I think about this in all aspects of life. At that moment in my life, I was like, every summer I was working, I was babysitting, I was doing something that was very challenging. I did like 7 weeks of backpacking the Southwest for 4 summers in a row with like not much equipment, and it was not many showers. I went and had internships. I worked, I babysat. Actually, that was my babysitting job, was the reason I got that internship at Wilson Sonsini. No, it was, I babysat for a partner, and I had for years, and they loved me, and he hooked me up.
So I think that just my take on that is the way to be willing to become vulnerable is just be vulnerable always, right? Like, be willing to do hard shit. And it doesn't matter, because babysitting, obviously, isn't that hard, but like it's much harder than going to the movies.
Oh,
with your friends when you're 12
totally.
years
Do
old.
the hard shit.
Always.
Absolutely
Yeah.
do the hard shit. Not like seek out like hard stuff for the sake of being hard, but like put your nose to the grindstone and get some experience and work in
Yeah.
it. Because how else are you going to know? Like I thought I wanted to be early on. I was like, oh, I want to be a graphic designer or an architect. I actually had a mentor when I was in high school who was this amazing architect in Palo Alto, and she would like take me to city council meetings, and we started talking, and I was like, this is incredible. And then I talked about the schooling and also then how much you got paid as an architect, at least at that time. And I was like, like maybe not for me. So I was like, maybe graphic designer. I went and did that as an internship. When I was in college, I realized that the process of making the end product that goes in the bottles before you actually make the bottle was not consistent with sort of my value set, actually, interestingly. I mean, we've never had this conversation, but what used to happen then, at least, was that this whole thing would be designed before the product was designed.
Yeah,
And
that's a Coca-Cola.
it's a
approach, right?
Coca-Cola approach, and I was like,
Sorry,
that just
Coke.
seems really off
Yeah.
to me. So I'm gonna go work on something else.
That's awesome.
And I got to draw from your experience here too for the people who are interested. But can you talk about the importance of building the right culture early on? Because it sounds like that's what you did at Instagram. Is what you helped them fix.
Oh my
Really
God,
their
yeah.
culture.
People and culture, you guys have heard me say this before. People and culture, I think, are everything.
Yeah.
I would say, an idea, so many people have the same ideas, as much as hard as it is to say. I think it's really people that light the fire, and it's a culture that allows it to scale. Because if you think about what scaling really is, I mean, define scale in the business concept? Like, how do you know if you've scaled appropriately?
I think for us, having a national presence, being a recognizable brand nationally rather than just our backyard.
Yeah.
I would say scale is just taking what has worked among a group and getting it to work for more people.
Yeah.
Like that's what scale is.
Yeah, it's a requirement in order to
Yeah.
be that large in terms of presence. Yeah.
Totally. I agree with them, but I always think, and I think the notion around it is that you have great product and then put together a strategy. And that's it. Like that's what people think about like starting a company. Get the product right, get the strategy right. But then everything else, in our eyes, what we're learning every day is culture.
Yeah.
It's people, it's team,
people and culture.
it's
Yeah.
values, it's
Totally.
vision. Right?
Totally.
So, I mean,
Well, the thing is, so I think of like one example of scale, right? It's large organizations working in long step, creating good products and communicating well, right? And part of one way you can test that is, would someone out in the field, given a set of information, make similar, or at least have the similar guardrails in making that decision as the CEO would or the founding team would, right? Yep. And to me, that's a test of culture. And I would say Google did an amazing job at building culture. First through sort of unofficial values statements that were talked about. They weren't posters on the walls, but they were talked about, right? Don't do evil was really important to us, really, especially when we were young. I mean, that first 10 years, there was a lot of don't do evil moments. I know it sounds funny with Google being so big now, but I can give you examples of where we intentionally left money on the table, walked away from things that would have been easy wins for us because we wanted to play the right way. So to me, if you think about culture, what is it really? It's really just the mindset and the way of behaving and the guardrails that really the founders, the executive team, the CEO has. That's what it is. Put into a formula that can be understood and applied to a broad set of practices. And the moment, so by the way, every company has a culture, even if you're not explicit about it. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's a strong culture, but you have one. Totally. And if you look at the qualities of any culture, you can almost always directly tie them back to the human characteristics of the leadership team. I think about Lululemon, a board I joined in 2011, which is, it's been in a tough category that it defined, but it's had competitors nipping at the heels forever. We're on our now third CEO since I joined the board. 9 years later, we're sitting here. The company is a runaway success, and hopefully, and should continue to be, because I would say from the first moment I stepped foot in Vancouver and had my first meetings, it was apparent to me that the culture was amazing.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So it seems the theme that I just gathered from sitting here is it's all about people, right? And given your background as art history major, a legal internship, a variety of internships, you didn't have any technical skills, right? You didn't know tech, like we didn't know coffee. It's one, surrounding yourself with the right people, being on the right team, having the right mentors, and then two, controlling your own destiny by working hard and sort of being curious. What's the biggest lesson working so closely with somebody like Sheryl Sandberg? What did you learn from her?
Oh my God, so much. I'll just highlight like maybe a couple things. I would say there was this moment when I was just like a new manager and we were doing reviews. We used to do 360 reviews, meaning that everyone on the team gave input and then I would take input and write my own review and deliver a review to an employee. So she was sitting in on my first reviews because I was delivering them for the first time. Yeah. By the way, that's a little intimidating. But so she sat in the review and I delivered it. And at the end I said, hey, do you have any feedback for me? As you do at the end of a review, right? And the person said, yeah, actually I have some feedback and da da da. And I was like, oh, okay, great to know. Because this was this, and actually that was just a misunderstanding. And I just explained it away. And we walked out and she did her like, how do you think that went? Kind of moment. And I was like, oh shit, she has feedback for me. But basically, her point was when someone gives you feedback, shut up and listen to it. Mm-hmm. Because perception is reality. Perception is reality. And the sooner that you can figure that out, the more effective you're going to be as a communicator. Because it does not matter how well-intentioned or even articulate something comes out of my mouth as, it's how did you receive it? Mm-hmm. And was that message clear or did you receive something else, right?
Totally.
And that is our ability to effectively communicate with people, right? So because that person felt that way, didn't mean that was all technically true, but probably some of it was, and at a minimum, the perception was true. And so she was like, there's a grain of truth there. You got to sleep on it. Yeah. And then take it away.
Take it.
So that was really important for me. The other lesson I would say, one of the things that she helped facilitate with our group was, I don't really love executive coaches in general, but we had an amazing one come in that Sheryl brought in, a guy named Fred Kaufman, who wrote a book called Conscious Business, which I've talked to you guys about before. And I love because this was a pivotal moment in my career growth. I came out of school, and you could probably get a little bit of a feeling for, I was like, whatever that thing is, I'm gonna whatever ends justify the mean, you're going down. we're gonna win. And I didn't realize, I was like, of course the ends justify the means. That's why it's a saying, right? Yeah. Of course you want to do everything, and of course you're going to have to work hard, and there are going to be stumbling blocks through it. But what I didn't really realize I was doing in that process was disregarding the way that I was doing it, meaning the way I was treating people. And through this coaching really came to a place where it's clear to me that actually I was completely wrong, that it's actually the means that justify the end, and you will get to maybe not the best outcome, but probably the best outcome if you actually let the path there guide you. Not that you can't stay focused and you don't know where you're heading, but actually the best outcomes come when you allow some morphing and you bring people along and you enjoy the process. And that was a major flip for me. And she was a big part of that.
That's awesome. Okay. That is awesome.
All right, so we're coming close to time here. And we've gone through your whole career path. Except now, abbreviated, of course. But now you're at Instagram, you have your tenure there, and then the pinnacle of your career, you end up as the COO at Snap.
Don't say it's a pinnacle.
No, to that point in your career.
By the way, I don't care about any of this. I know it sounds funny, and there's so much, and I'm not sure I could say this when I was at that point, but I don't care about any of this.
In terms of titles.
I don't care about titles. I don't care about I just want to do something that I feel like I can add value, have fun, work with great people, and have an impact, right? That's what I care about. But the question was, how do I go from Instagram to Snapchat?
No. The question is, you end up at Snapchat as a COO, and one, that recruiting story is epic, which we've heard, and we're not going to get into today. But you go to Snapchat, and it isn't necessarily what you thought it was going to be, right? And we can talk about that, but I just want to know what you learned at Snap in dealing with adversity and dealing with the shiny.
It could have been a toxic culture, right?
Yeah,
sort of stepped into a bad culture.
Yeah, so if you could just talk about what happened as you were the COO of Snap, and just turned it into optimistic, positive impact for who you are today at Anthos as the president.
Yeah.
And just that, I think that's such a cool story that you've articulated that to us in the past.
Yeah. I would say I definitely had a moment early on where I was like, this is not probably the culture and the values that I like are consistent with the place that I want to spend my time, or frankly, even a place that I could necessarily be super successful. But I was in a tough spot because I had moved my family down, and Brian was working down here, and it's a big pill to swallow when you have that much responsibility. And so I sort of turned to, okay, well, what do I do? And how do I turn this into major lemonade? And so I decided at that moment that I was just going to put my head down and like smile my way through it as much as I possibly could, and like build the best thing that I could build. And I knew somewhere in my heart of hearts that I would be walking away from the situation having learned a lot, basically. And I knew that I wouldn't necessarily enjoy it all. It was those moments where you just have someone just gives you a pair of glasses, and I just felt like I saw exactly what was going to happen. It was weird. But so I did exactly that. I put my head down and recruited an executive team and built a monetization product, and use the opportunity to constantly question my own values, my own assumptions, my own way of doing things, because no way is right. And it was a pretty incredible opportunity to work in an ecosystem that was very different than anything I was used to. And that has got to make you stronger, even if it's stuff that you're like, okay, I definitely wouldn't do it that way. But now I know, right? Because other than that, you're in this imposter syndrome. Is it me? And is this the right answer? And so it was in some ways an amazing playground for that experience.
Absolutely.
That is, yeah.
That's epic. But now you're the president of Anthos and running this place post there. So what is one thing that you took from that time at Snap that you're infusing into Anthos?
I don't know if you can do one thing, because we're all a product of all of these other experiences. I will tell you that I wasn't super excited about being an investor. I don't know if you guys knew this, but I was like, I'm an operator. I love teamwork. I love communication. I love people and culture. Those are not three things that are highly associated with venture investing, right? Yeah. Or growth investing. And so before I joined, Paul and Brian were like, come. And I said, well, let's see, let me work on a project to see if I like it, if I can actually do good things, if the team wants me here, right? And so what will that be? What can I help with? And they said, listen, we want a place where A+ people come and A+ people stay. Help us. And I was like, okay, I can totally do that. And so I spent 6 months sort of part-time working on this project to help really break down what our culture was, what we wanted to be, and change the building blocks a little bit. When we're 20 people, we're half women. We're at the perfect time and place to do this. Yeah, totally. And we sort of reinforced all the good things, changed some stuff that we wanted to change, and I would say built this place to be a very happy, well-functioning group where we have A+ people come and A+ people stay. So that was a direct result of all of those experiences, realizing that people and culture are everything.
Yeah,
totally.
That's
so
incredible.
One thing that's clear to me, a lot of things. I'm obviously inspired. The positive energy is very real coming off of you right now. Your ambition is second to none, and I think that's sort of the driving force. And a lot of the people watching this are ambitious, right? And they don't know what their career is going to unfold. So we'll give you last word here. What would you say to the 22-year-old who wants to tackle the world, right? Who sees the end and is going to get there by any means necessary?
Yeah. Well, besides think also about the process, the way that you get there. Listen, what's so cool when you think about meritocracy, and one of the things I like about meritocracy is it is a channel by which you can bend the world to your will, right? Mm-hmm. Meaning I can be a 25-year-old CEO, or I can be I can be an inventor, and I don't know anything about this space, which actually is something that happens in tech all of the time and is now happening, I think, in a greater way all over the world, in part because of tech, is anything's possible. And so I think about you guys, we as Anthos, we're mostly growth investors. We invest in traction over theory. You guys are three brothers. That's a complicated relationship. You're all super young, right? And you are not, you at the time that we had those early conversations, we're still relatively earlier in the company. And so at just a profile look, we're I don't know if this is an Anthos investment. You came in and completely changed our minds and gave us the faith that you guys were able to take down walls. And in that process, bent our will to your reality. So you're such a good example of what is possible. And so don't put yourself in a box. And this is another thing. I see women do this a lot of like, oh, I can't even apply for that internship because they don't accept sophomores. I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Just apply, you know?
Make it happen.
Make it happen. So sometimes you just have to do it.
So in the words of Marshawn Lynch, be about that action, boss. Is that
Be about
There we
that.
go.
That's
There we go.
right.
That's what I was going to say.
This was
Emily, this
amazing.
is sweet.
Yeah, this
Yes.
was so cool. Thank you so
Good.
much.
You're welcome. Happy
Thank
to.
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Onward and upward. That's it, folks. Positive Energy Project. Get after it. Get out there. See you on the next one.
Let's go.